She told a single
Daniel,
dad,
if this jet takes off tonight,
I'll make you rich. Then he saw one tiny crack and ordered everyone off the plane. The crack was about 4 centimeters long. You could have covered it with your thumb. Under the work light, it looked like nothing. A faint silver hairline running across the upper attach fitting where the right engine pylon meets the wing. Just visible where the edge of the fairing had already gaped open enough to catch the light on it. I was on my back on a creeper, flashlight in my teeth, and I hadn't even gotten the panel fully off yet when I knew exactly what I was looking at. I knew because I'd lost sleep over that fitting 9 years ago, in a conference room 4 states away, arguing with men who didn't want to hear me. But nobody in that hangar knew that yet. As far as they were concerned, I was just the night shift inspector somebody had dragged in off his day off. Vivian Crane crouched down beside me in a coat that cost more than my truck and said the words I'll remember for the rest of my life. Daniel, if this jet takes off tonight, I'll make you rich. Whatever number's in your head, double it. I took the flashlight out of my mouth. I looked at that thin silver line one more time, exactly where I'd said it would be all those years ago, to a room full of people who'd written me off. Then I looked at her. Get everyone off the plane, I said. Nobody flies tonight. By sunrise, 12 people would understand why a hairline cracked the length of a paperclip was worth more than the entire company. And by sunrise, every one of them would also know the thing I'd spent 6 years not telling anyone in that building. But let me start where it started, because the crack isn't really the beginning. The beginning is a decision I made 9 years ago, and the price I paid for it. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 41 years old. These days, I'm a lead inspector at a private maintenance facility outside Scottsdale, Arizona, an A&P mechanic with an inspection authorization, which is the certificate that lets me sign the paper that says an aircraft is safe to fly. When I sign it, I own it. If that airplane comes apart in the sky, the investigators come looking for my signature first. That's what I am now. It's not what I was, but I'll get to that. Let me tell you about my son first, because he's the reason any of this matters. Mateo is 9. He lives with me full-time. His mother, Carmen, and I split up about 4 years ago. No big dramatic story. We just stopped being good for each other, and she's in Denver now with a new husband. Mateo sees her on holidays. The rest of the time, it's the two of us. In a small house with a mortgage I think about more than I'd like to admit. The night this all happened started like any other. I picked Mateo up from his after-school program at 5:30. On the drive home, he told me, in the serious lecturing voice he gets, that his science fair project was a disaster. The bridge keeps failing, Dad. I put the weights on and it just folds. Where's it folding? The middle. Then the middle's not your problem, I said. The middle's where you can see it bend. Your problem's where the legs meet the deck. That's where the force actually goes. Look at the joints, not the part that's moving. He went quiet, turning that over. We had tacos. He rebuilt his bridge joints at the kitchen table while I cleaned up. At 7, my neighbor Rosa, a retired nurse who watches him when I get called in, came over, and my phone rang. It was Marcus, my night shift supervisor, and he sounded like a man standing too close to a fire. Danny, I need you here, tonight. We've got the Meridian jet, the big charter outfit. Their CEO is down here personally, and she's leaning on everybody. Tobias signed the daily, but there was a flag, and I don't... Danny, just come look at it, please. What kind of airplane? An Altair 700. I didn't say anything for a second. Marcus didn't know what he'd just said to me. To him, it was a model number. To me, it was 9 years of my life. I'm on my way, I said. I kissed the top of Mateo's head, told him to be in bed by 9, and drove out to the field with my hands a little tighter on the wheel than they needed to be. Here's what I walked into. Meridian Jet Group was Vivian Crane's company. Charter flights, aircraft management, and one crown jewel they'd sunk everything into. And Altair. A 700, a long-range business jet they'd bought rough and rebuilt over 8 months into something that could cross an ocean without blinking. It was beautiful. It was also the entire bet of the company. Vivian had 4 investors in a room upstairs, and the whole deal hinged on tonight. The jet was supposed to fly those investors out to a property in Aspen, Wheels Up by 11, a live demonstration of everything Meridian could do. Close the round, and the company had a future. Miss it, and the money walked. I understood all of that within 90 seconds because everyone told me at once. The chief pilot met me at the hangar door before I'd even clipped on my badge. Tall, polished, silver at the temples. Grant Mercer. "You, the second opinion?" he said, and the way he said it told me exactly what he thought of second opinions. "The airplane's fine. We had a vibration parameter flag on the right engine during run-up, within limits, almost certainly the sensor. Ops wanted a structural set of eyes before dispatch, due diligence, fine. But we are wheels up at 11, so whatever you're going to look at, look fast." "Vibration on the right engine," I said. "Which parameter?" He blinked. Most inspectors don't ask that. "Lateral, why?" "No reason yet," I said. But that was a lie, and it was the first lie of the night. Because a lateral vibration flag on that engine, on that airframe, meant the engine was hanging a hair out of where it should be. And there's exactly one thing on that aircraft that holds the engine in line. I'd done the loads analysis on it myself. I just didn't say that. Not yet. Tobias was 26, sharp, eager, already defensive when I found him by the right wing. He'd done the inspection. He told me he'd checked the pylon area, that everything looked nominal, that the vibration was probably the accelerometer. I didn't argue with him. I never argue at that stage. The metal doesn't care about anybody's argument. I just asked for a creeper and a fresh light, and I went under the right wing. I didn't go to the panel Tobias had opened. I went straight to a fairing edge 2 feet inboard of it, the one nobody opens on a routine check because the manual doesn't tell you to. I knew to open it because, a long time ago, I'd been in the meetings where we decided what the manual would and wouldn't tell you to open, and I'd lost the argument about this exact spot. That's where I was, getting the first fastener loose, when Vivian Crane found me and offered to make me rich, and I told her to get everyone off the plane. For a second, she didn't move. I watched her face do the math, decide whether I was a problem to be managed or an idiot to be steamrolled. "Mr. Reyes," she said very evenly, "I'm going to need you to explain that." Slowly. "There are 4 people in my office about to write a check that keeps 200 people employed, and they expect to be in the air in 3 hours. I slid out, stood up, my knees popped. 41. "Come here," I said. "I'll show you." I worked the last fasteners free and folded the fairing panel down, and I handed her my flashlight and pointed at the silver line, fully exposed now. "That's the upper attach fitting for the right engine pylon. The engine doesn't bolt to the wing. It hangs off a pylon, and the pylon hangs off fittings top and bottom. That's the top one. That line running across the lug is a crack." "It's a scratch," Grant said behind me. "It's not. A scratch sits on the surface and catches your nail one direction. That catches both ways. That's an opening." I looked at Vivian. "And it's a fatigue crack, which means the metal's been working itself to death in that spot for a long time. It didn't appear today. It's been growing for years. Tonight's just the night somebody finally looked in the right place." Grant made a sound through his nose. "There are allowable damage limits in the structural repair manual." "Not for a crack through a primary attach fitting lug, there aren't," I said. "Corrosion, dents, sure. A crack through the load path is a no-go item. You know that." He did know it. I watched him know it, and I watched him decide he'd rather not. That's the part people who've never been in that room don't get. It wasn't that nobody else could see it. It's that seeing it was inconvenient, and so a whole group of intelligent, experienced people had quietly agreed not to look there. I knew the feeling. I'd watched a whole company do it once. Vivian straightened. The managing column had a hairline crack of its own in it now. "So, we find another mechanic, someone who'll sign it. With respect, Mr. Reyes, you've been here 20 minutes. And here's where the night turned, because I was tired, and I was standing under an airplane I'd helped build, looking at the exact failure I'd predicted, being told I'd been there 20 minutes. "I've been here 20 minutes, I said, "but I've known about that fitting for 9 years. The hangar went quiet. "What does that mean?" Vivian said. "It means I want you to do something before you fire me," I said. Call Altair, not their sales line, their field service engineering group. Tell them you have a suspected fatigue crack on the right-hand upper pylon attach fitting of an A700 and read them the airframe serial number off the data plate. And while you're at it, I almost stopped myself and didn't. Ask them to pull the original loads and fatigue analysis for that fitting. Ask whose name is on the dissenting memo in the certification file. Whose name is on it? She said. I didn't answer that. Not yet. Some things you have to earn the right to say out loud, even when they're about you. Just make the call, I said. She studied me for a long moment. Then, and this is the first thing that made me think there was more to Vivian Crane than the coat, she didn't fire me. She took out her phone. It's 9 o'clock at night, Grant said. It's a manufacturer's field service line, I said. Somebody's always on it. That's the whole point of it. While she dialed, I did the thing that I think actually saved everyone, the thing they teach you and you hope you never have to use. I walked to the maintenance logbook, and in my own hand, with the date and the time, 9:48 p.m., I entered a discrepancy. Suspected fatigue crack, right engine forward pylon upper attach fitting. Aircraft grounded pending non-destructive inspection. Return to service withheld. I signed it with my certificate number. The second that entry existed, that airplane was legally grounded until a qualified person signed it back into service. Vivian could fire every inspector in Arizona. She could not make that jet airworthy. I'd just nailed it to the floor with a pen. Tobias watched me, pale. Did I miss that? It's under a fairing edge the manual doesn't send you to, I said. It's a hard catch. I paused, because the kid deserved the real lesson, not the comfortable one. But the vibration flag wasn't nothing. That was the airframe telling you the engine's drifted out of line, and there's only one thing that holds it in line. You felt the symptom. You just didn't follow it back to the cause. Next time something flags, don't ask, is this within limits? Ask, what would have to be true for this to be happening? That question puts your hand right on this fitting. He nodded. He'd be okay. The ones who feel sick when they nearly miss something always are. It's the ones who shrug that scare me. Across the hangar, Vivian was talking quietly into her phone, then less quietly, then she stopped talking at all and just listened for a long time. When she finally lowered the phone, she came back across the floor and she was looking at me differently. Not warmly, carefully. The way you look at something when you've just learned it's not what the label said. They're sending a field service engineer and a team, she said slowly. Tonight, from their regional office. The man on the phone got very serious very fast when I read him the fitting and the serial number. She paused. And then he asked me how I'd known to call about that specific fitting. I told him my inspector flagged it. He asked your name. I waited. I gave it to him, she said. He went quiet. Then he said, and I'm quoting him, "If Daniel Reyes is the one who found it, then it's real, and you should thank God he was in the building." Grant Mercer looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Who are you?" Vivian said. So I told her. Standing under the right wing of an airplane I'd helped design, at 10 o'clock at night, I finally told someone the whole thing. I didn't start as a mechanic and stay one. I started as one, got my A and P at 21, turning wrenches because I loved the way a machine tells you the truth if you know how to listen. Then I put myself through an engineering degree at night, and I went corporate, aerospace structures. And 9 years ago, I was a structural engineer at Altair Aerospace, on the team responsible for the wing-to-pylon attached structure of a brand new airplane, the A700. This airplane, this family of airplanes, the one I was now lying under in a hangar in the desert. "You designed this jet," Vivian said. "I didn't design the whole jet. Thousands of people design a jet. I worked on one piece of it, the structure that holds the engines on. And during certification, I ran the fatigue analysis on the upper attached fittings, and I didn't like what I saw. This is the part I'd never told anyone in Arizona. Not Marcus, not the people I worked with every day. They thought I was a mechanic with a chip on his shoulder and good instincts. Nobody knew about the conference room. The fitting met the requirements. On paper, barely. The analysis said it would last the design life under the loads we expected. But I kept finding scenarios, hard landings, certain turbulence, a particular way the loads stacked up, where the margin got thin. Not, it fails tomorrow thin. It might crack years early if the conditions are wrong, and our inspection interval is too long to catch it in time. Thin. I wanted 2 things: a small design change to add margin, or, if not that, a much shorter mandatory inspection interval at that fitting, with a specific instruction telling mechanics to open that fairing and look. It would have cost money. It would have slipped the certification schedule. There were people whose bonuses and careers were tied to that schedule. I was overruled. The analysis was within limits. The interval stayed long. The instruction to open that fairing didn't make it into the manual. And I was, in the language of corporations, not a team player. "So you quit," Vivian said. "I wrote a memo," I said. "A formal dissent. I put it in the certification file, which is your legal right and your professional duty if you believe something's unsafe. I laid out the failure mode, fatigue, cracking at the upper attach fitting lug, and I said the inspection interval wouldn't catch it in time. I signed it. And then, eventually I left. Not in a blaze of glory. They made my life small until there was no reason to stay, and one day I cleaned out my desk and went back to the only thing I ever fully trusted, which was turning wrenches and signing my own name to my own work. I looked up at the fitting, at the silver line catching the work light. For 6 years I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the difficult guy who couldn't let go. And then tonight Marcus says, "I'll tear a 700 on the phone," and I drive out here and I open a fairing nobody opens, and there it is. Exactly where I said it would be, exactly the way I said it would happen. Nobody said anything for a while. Somewhere in the hangar a fluorescent light was buzzing. "You could have told me who you were the second I doubted you," Vivian said, "instead of letting me threaten to fire you. If I'd led with 'I designed this, trust me,' I'd have been one more guy with the story," I said. "The logbook entry doesn't care who I used to be. The dye penetrant test that's coming doesn't care. The crack is true whether I'm a genius or a crank. I'd rather the metal speak for me. It always has." She looked at me for a long moment. "My father used to say something like that," she said quietly, and then she didn't explain it and I didn't ask. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that there was one more thing buried in this, and it was worse than a crack. The Altair team arrived a little after midnight. The field service engineer was a calm, gray-haired man named David Okafor, and he came through the hangar door, looked at me across the floor and stopped. "Reyes," he said, "I read your memo years ago. When I took over the fleet structures desk, I read the whole certification file, front to back, and yours was the one document in it that kept me up at night." He walked over and shook my hand like it meant something. "I want you to know, I argued to shorten that interval 2 years ago. I got the same answer you did." 2 of his techs started setting up, and while they prepped, Okafor told us the thing that turned my stomach. "This airframe," he said, looking at the data plate, then at a file on his tablet. "It's not just any A700, it's an early one, and it has history." He scrolled. "It had a hard landing, event 4 years ago, under its previous operator. Overweight, high sink rate, the works. It was inspected and returned to service." He looked up. But the inspection that was performed after that hard landing was the standard one. The interval that's in the manual. The one that doesn't send you to this fitting. I felt the floor tilt a little. "So, this fitting took the worst day of its life 4 years ago," I said. "The exact kind of event I flagged. And then it went back into service and nobody ever looked here, because the manual I tried to change never told them to." "That's right," Okafor said quietly. "Your failure mode, your interval, your fitting." He set the tablet down. "Let's prove it. Then, let's make sure it never happens to another one." They ran a dye penetrant inspection first. If you've never seen it, they clean the area, spray on a fluorescent dye that seeps into any opening too small to see, wipe the surface, then spray a developer that pulls the dye back out of the crack. Under ultraviolet light, anything that's truly a crack glows like a thread of green fire. It turns, "I think I see something," into There it is, and it's not a matter of opinion anymore. They killed the lights. Okafor put the UV lamp on the fitting. That 4-centimeter line lit up like a vein of green lightning, and it was longer than it had looked under white light, curving down into the lug, into the part of the metal you couldn't see at all. Then Okafor ran an eddy current probe over it, the tool that hears how deep a crack runs by how it disturbs a magnetic field, watched the readout, and went very still. "This is well past surface," he said. "It's propagating through the lug. Better than halfway." He looked at me, then at Vivian. "Ma'am, this fitting was not going to survive a heavy long-range cycle. Maybe not the climb out tonight. If you'd flown to Aspen at max takeoff weight and hit any real turbulence over that terrain—" He didn't finish it the soft way. "The pylon would have failed. The engine would have departed the aircraft. At altitude, at speed, with full tanks, that's not an emergency landing, that's not survivable." The hangar was dead silent. 4 investors, 2 pilots, a flight attendant, a couple of Meridian people who'd have ridden along to host, 12 souls, on a flight that was supposed to leave at 11 o'clock, about an hour ago now, in the timeline of the night that didn't happen. I looked at Vivian. She was staring at the glowing green line like it was a photograph of something terrible that hadn't occurred. And I understood she was doing the same arithmetic I was, except every name on her list was someone she'd personally invited onto that airplane. "I was going to be on it," she said, not to me, to the fitting. "I was going to sit in the back and watch their faces when we lifted off." She didn't cry. She wasn't built that way. But something left her face and something else arrived, and when she finally turned to me, her voice had lost every gram of the steel from 3 hours before. "I offered you money to ignore that," she said. "I stood right there and offered to make you rich if you'd let it fly. You did. And you said get everyone off the plane. I did." She nodded slowly. "And 9 years ago, you tried to stop this before it was ever built, and a company chose a schedule over you, and it cost you your career. It did. And you came back to it anyway, as a mechanic. You spent 6 years underneath the airplanes you used to design, and you never told anyone." "The airplanes don't care about my resume," I said. "And neither, it turns out, does a crack. There's a postscript to that night that's bigger than that night, and it's the part I'm actually proud of. Because of what was in that lug, and because of a 9-year-old memo that suddenly mattered very much, Altair couldn't treat this as one airplane's bad luck. If this fitting had cracked from a known failure mode at a known weak point, then every A700 that had ever taken a hard landing was suspect." Okafor's team in the hangar that night became the first data point in something much larger. Within weeks, Altair issued a service bulletin instructing operators to perform a one-time eddy current inspection of that upper attach fitting on the entire fleet, with a new, much shorter recurring interval after that, basically the interval I'd asked for 9 years earlier. And because a safety of flight finding like that isn't optional, the FAA followed with an airworthiness directive, making that inspection mandatory, legally enforceable, fleet-wide, worldwide. They found cracking on 2 other airframes, both early jets, both with hard landing history, both inspected and returned to service under the old interval, both flying. I think about those 2 airplanes more than I think about ours, honestly. Ours had me lying under it at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday by pure luck. Those 2 had nobody. The only thing standing between them and a canyon was a paragraph in a directive that existed because of a 4-centimeter line in a hangar in Scottsdale, and a memo a younger, angrier version of me had filed in a drawer 9 years before, when I had no idea anyone would ever read it. You do the right thing once, quietly, and lose your career for it, and you spend 6 years thinking it meant nothing. And then, one night, it reaches out and saves people you'll never meet on airplanes you'll never see. I don't have a clean way to say what that did to me. I just know I needed it more than I knew. Now, I told you there's no fairy tale, and there isn't. Vivian didn't hand me a check for $1 million. Real life doesn't work like that. What she did was, in some ways, better, and it took her a few weeks to do it because she did it properly instead of dramatically. The investor deal cratered, by the way. Of course it did. You can't tell 4 money men, The demonstration jet had a fatal crack, and expect them to feel reassured. The lead investor, a brittle man named Pruitt, made a comment about whether Meridian was ready for prime time and said they'd reconvene, which in money language means no. The most important night of Vivian Crane's life was a smoking ruin. A lot of executives in that spot bury the inspector who caused it. Quietly fix the airplane, fire the troublemaker, control the story. Vivian called the manufacturer and the FAA herself that first morning before anyone made her. That told me who she actually was underneath the coat, and about 3 weeks later, I'll get the timing exactly right because it matters to me, she asked me to come to her office and she offered me a job. Not my old inspector slot, a new one. Director of Airworthiness and Safety for Meridian, reporting to nobody but the board. Independent. Untouchable by operations, untouchable by sales. I told her I'd take it under conditions, and we negotiated them on the record, in writing, like adults. I told her the real problem in her company was never a bad mechanic. Tobias wasn't a bad mechanic. The real problem was that for one night, the entire survival of the company had been allowed to lean on the one person whose only job was to say no when no was true, and then that person had been offered a bonus to say yes by the most powerful person in the building, with the chief pilot breathing down his neck. I told her that the whole value of an inspector's signature is that it cannot be bought or rushed, and the second it can be, it's worthless, and so is every airplane it's ever signed. So here's what I asked for, and what she gave me in writing with the board's signatures on it, an inspection and airworthiness authority that reported independently, never under the people whose job is to make the airplane fly on time or sell the seats. Hard staffing and rest rules so nobody ever again did a safety of flight inspection at the tail end of a 16-hour day with everyone watching the clock. And a signed stop authority policy. Any mechanic, any inspector, could ground any aircraft for a safety reason and could not be fired, disciplined, demoted, or pressured for it. Ever. Even if they turned out to be wrong. Because the day you punish a person for a no that turned out to be unnecessary is the day everyone quietly learns to stop saying no. And then one day the no that needed saying never comes, and 12 people get on an airplane. She signed all of it. 9 years ago, she said when the pen was down, a company decided your no was too expensive. I'd like Meridian to be the place that decided it wasn't. She slid the document across the desk so I could see my own name printed at the top of it. It should have your name on it. You paid for it twice. I didn't have anything to say to that, so I just signed. I got home late the night it all got finalized, about 3 weeks, almost to the day after the night in the hangar. Mateo was at the kitchen table, and the bridge was gone. The science fair had come and gone with everything else. How'd the bridge do? I asked. He held up a little blue ribbon, second place. Second, I said. What beat you? A volcano. He rolled his eyes exactly the way his mother used to. Everybody loves a volcano. But Dad, and he got serious, that careful, thinking it all the way through serious he gets. The judge said mine was the only one that didn't fail when they loaded the heavy weights on. The volcano just looked cool. Mine actually held. I sat down across from him. You know why it held. Because I fixed the joints. Where the force goes, not the part you can see. Where the force goes, I said, not the part you can see. He grinned and went back to whatever he was building next. A catapult, I think, God help my kitchen. And I sat there and thought about a 4-centimeter line on a fitting under a fairing edge, the part nobody is told to look at, where all the force goes. And I thought about a younger man in a conference room 9 years ago, losing an argument and a career, filing a memo into a drawer, certain it would never matter to anyone. It mattered. It just took 9 years and one cold night to find out. I make a decent living now. I'll never be rich. There's a version of that night where I take the money and I'm a wealthy man, and there is no version of that night where I take the money and I get to sit across a kitchen table and explain to my son why you reinforce the joints nobody can see. I picked the table. I'd pick it again every single time. So let me ask you just one thing before you go. I went back to work quietly underneath the very thing that cost me my career, and I waited 6 years without ever knowing if being right would matter. here's what I want to know from you. Have you ever been the person in the room who said the hard no, the one nobody wanted to hear? And did it ever come back around the way mine did? Or are you still waiting? Tell me in the comments. I read them, and I'd really like to know. And if this story meant something to you, if you believe the person who says the difficult no is worth more than the person who says the easy yes, do me a favor. Hit that like button, leave a comment so the next person finds this, and subscribe, because the next story is one I've wanted to tell for a long time, and you're not going to want to miss it.